So welcome back to Drinks and Discussions True Crime. Today I am here with my beautiful guest, Hellcat Bevan. And
hello, guys.
We are going to be having some drinks and discussing this latest case about the Idaho University murders. So I am drinking. It's early this morning, so I'm having a little coffee with some Emmett. I don't know if y'all know what Emmett's is, but it's like Bailey's. But I just like it more. But Bevan, what are you drinking today?
I'm drinking a Dr. Pepper because when I drink actual liquor, I end up places that, like in true crime situations. So
That is no lie.
stick with Doctor a day keeps the police away. That's my theory.
So today we are talking about, like I said, Bryan Kohberger and the Idaho University murders, also known as the Moscow murders because it happened in Moscow, Idaho. So this case, obviously, we are still receiving information on this case, and me and Bevan are going to use our professional crime junkie analysis to tell you our thoughts on this case. But first, I would like to say, when we're doing like an analysis like this, sometimes it's hard to remember that the victims in this case are real people and their families are experiencing real tragedy right now. So obviously we want to be as respectful as possible to their families, because this case is ongoing right now. They are experiencing this trauma right now. It is a terrible, terrible thing. And for the 4 young people who were killed, I've heard just the most wonderful things about each of them. So let's talk about them first. So the 4, there was actually more than just those victims. Yeah, there was more than just those victims in the actual house. But the people who were murdered was Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. They were students at the University of Idaho for different things. Not going to go into what each of their degrees were, but some of them were in their senior year. They were finishing up school. So, Bevan, of course, you know I love plants and things like that, if you can see behind me. And I don't know if you heard about this, but did you hear that Ethan, they had one of the last places that he had visited was like a tulip festival, and one of his friends reached out to these like tulip people and was like, could you please make a tulip for Ethan? And they made a type of tulip that's like yellow and white, and it's called Ethan Smile. So if you want to plant your own Ethan Smile garden in your house, anyone can do it.
Do you think that would be a good idea? I wonder if they have a hashtag on Instagram, Ethan Smalls. When you plan it, you can kind of upload your photos there and maybe show his family that,
Oh, yeah. Well, they just made it, so they're going to hopefully pop up in the spring. So hopefully in the springtime, we'll see lots of Ethan Smile all over the U.S. I'm not sure. Go ahead.
I said that's really sweet.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet how you can get them, but I know that they are in production. They've already sent a lot of them out. And I thought that was pretty neat.
That's actually they make hybrids like that. That's actually really, I like doing that for Memorial because it's something that will last forever and it's different and it's something that he loves. So that's really, I think, a really, really impactful thing for the victim's family too.
I think that's, and just that it happened so fast. Like they asked the tulip guy, like, hey, can you do this? And he was like, hell yeah. And they did it super fast. It's not easy to just manufacture a brand new kind of tulip, you know what I'm saying? But they did it. So let's see. I got to scroll down to my list here. the people who were murdered. Okay, here we go. Maddie Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves were besties all through high school. And they were on TikTok and stuff. They were like young, 21 years old, I think, right?
Well, normal girls. Kaylee Goncalves, her family has actually been the most outspoken about this case. They've really been like a really instrumental part of seeking justice and really like getting information out there to the public. So my
Right.
heart just goes out to all the victims' families, but you can tell that her family is just really
Yeah.
beside themselves about this whole thing. And they said that they were best friends growing up from the time they were little girls. I mean, sleepovers. So, I mean, you can just imagine what both these sets of parents are going through.
Oh, yeah.
All the victims' families are going through. But it was
Yeah.
really sad because I remember seeing an interview with her family, and they were saying, they went into college together, and then they left together, like they were, still side by side best friends. And I think that gave them. I don't know what kind of comfort you can have in these type of situations, but I think knowing that she was with her best friend at the time, somehow I don't know what kind of comfort that is as a parent, but that's something that they kind of admitted. So
Her father, Steve Goncalves, he said, in the end, they died together in the same room, in the same bed, and it comforts us
there
to
you
let them
go.
they were the best friends in the whole world. Um, their memorials were packed, the ones for these girls. They're Kaylee and Maddie. Their memorials were absolutely packed, and they had two memorials, one for each of them. Both of them totally packed. I know that Kaylee was going to school to be a teacher. She loved children, and they both of them were beautiful, beautiful girls. The other two, that was Xana and Ethan, they were in a relationship together, and they were in their 20s. I think Ethan was literally 20 years old. He was very young. I know that 18 years old is an adult, but we're like in our like mid 30s, and when we hear somebody like 20 years old, they're
Yeah.
young. They're young people. But they had something really special. Ethan was a big dude. I mean, he was a big, tall guy, and he had a smile just as big as he was. But the Ethan, this is what I couldn't remember. Ethan worked for the tulip farm before he went to college. So that's why the guy was like, hell yeah, I'll do a tulip for Ethan. But yeah, he was a big guy, big smile. He just kind of struck people in a way that he was like a gentle giant. And him
That
and him,
was the kind of strong guy.
it sounds like you're singing a little robot song.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robot. So, anyways.
Domo domo. No, you're better now.
Sorry. Okay.
But Ethan was actually a triplet.
That's why he was. He was.
Yeah.
They said that that the other two of the triplets are taking this extremely hard. I mean, I can't imagine. So
They were womb mates, they've been together since before birth. And all of these people, they all went to the University of Idaho. They were doing really good. Some of them were about to finish. And I just think that whenever everyone found out that these four people had been murdered, that it was shocking, obviously. And some people, they couldn't even believe it. They sent Ethan text messages saying like, hey, are you okay? And he didn't respond. And that has actually happened to me before when somebody said, hey, I think so-and-so passed away. And I text them like not thinking it was real, like, please just respond to me. It's unbelievable. It's like you're living in an alternate reality. So I can't even imagine losing him and his beautiful girlfriend that the family was obviously really close with. But so that's about them. They were all really good students, and they were close. They were all together in this house. And like we said, there was two other people who lived in the house as well. I I know that like in the affidavit they just used like their initials. So
Well,
I'm
the
not.
DM that they're using actually is Dylan Mortensen. That's already confirmed. That's the roommate that actually sued them. That's the one. So they're calling her DM, but they have also released her name as Dylan. So we know that it's a girl named Dylan, and our heart goes out to her. And then another girl, but I don't remember her name.
Yeah. So those two people were in the house. They were not murdered. Why were they not murdered? That obviously I don't know. Could they have been spooked by the DoorDash guy, the killer? Could he have been spooked? I'm assuming it's Bryan. Could the killer have been spooked by the DoorDash guy? Could they have had some knowledge of the things happening? I'm not saying that they did because, oh God, if they, I don't want to say that they did, but I'm just saying we don't know why they were left alive, but I guess thank God that they were, because one of them was the ones who called 911 the next morning. But so all at the time, all they knew was in the early morning hours, something had happened. And then they called 911 the next morning, and the police arrived around 11 a.m. So, Bevan, break it down for us. What is this timeline of the actual crime that took place?
Was really detailed, and it really gave a lot of more interesting facts that a lot of people weren't aware of. We did know that the crime took place in the early morning hours. We know that the two best friends, Kaylee Goncalves and then Maddie, I believe, they were at a food truck or a local food stand in the college town about 1 a.m. And then they returned home somewhere in between 1 and 2, in between 2 and 4. They had all went to their respective rooms, or the two girls were together, and then the couple was together, and then the two respective girls were in their bedrooms, I believe. Now, they said that the crime took place anywhere between 4 to 4:25 a.m., but what's interesting is one of the girls had ordered a DoorDash, which was about at 4 a.m. when it had arrived. She came back in and was on TikTok at around 4:12 a.m. What's interesting, though, is they see the Elantra that the alleged, Bryan Kohberger, whatever his name is, I don't really care for him that much. They said that he was leaving the scene around 4:20 a.m. So it's interesting that between 4:12 a.m. and 4:20 a.m. or 4:25, whenever this time's occurring, that's not a very big. That's about a 12-minute window, I believe, to have a quadruple homicide. That's basically all they know. She was on TikTok. The girl that was in the room, the bedroom, the survivor, that actually had seen Bryan Kohberger said that around 4 a.m. and she's on the second floor with a couple. She says that she opened her door 3 times between 4 and 4:20, I believe, that morning. She had heard what she believed was Miss, the girl above her, bad with names. She was playing with her dog. She thought that she heard her playing with her dog, so she kept looking. She didn't see anything. She kept looking. She didn't see anything. And I think on the third time, she said that this is when she sees the suspect coming to her. It's black. It's pitch dark. And according to her, he's dressed. He's covered. And she says that she froze, and he just kind of walks past her, which is very interesting. And then she says that after that, she kind of goes into, I guess, a state of shock, and she locks herself into her room for about 8 hours until she calls 911. So that's a really interesting timeline. And my kind of theory on it is I think he was already in the house before they got home, and which is why I think he started from the 3rd level and went down to the 2nd level.
Right.
She also said that she had heard Miss, is it Gonzalez? Say her name for me.
I don't think it is, but now I have an ad just popped up on my crap. Hold on.
Oh, it's like it's
well, you can just call her by her first name.
Xana, correct? Okay,
Yeah.
I was making sure that was the correct first name. I don't want
to butcher his name, so we'll just call her Xana. We know that.
Okay, thank you. I totally got lost in last names and first names. So Xana, the girl Dylan, who was a survivor, she thought DM is who's she stated in the affidavit, thought that she heard Xana playing with her dog. She said she also heard Xana say something like, "There's somebody here." Now, when you hear your roommate say, "There's somebody here," and then you see a man dressed in all black walking past you.
No, you're thinking about what we would do.
Oh, okay.
We could bust into the room and be like, what the fuck is going on? Right?
Right. So
Maybe she was younger. Maybe she wouldn't do something like that. Maybe she was in a state of terror.
well, and that's something too. A lot of people are online going, well, why wouldn't she call 911? Well, here's some interesting theories. Some people said, what if her phone died? She didn't have a charger. She's too afraid to go out. I have anxiety. That's a very plausible theory. What if she was intoxicated? You have to think about it. You're intoxicated. You're in shock. Things happen, and you do freeze. You go to bed because you're triggering yourself. Oh, I'm just being paranoid. I'm just being paranoid.
You were partying. Maybe she was so intoxicated that she passed out. Correct. And didn't wake up for several hours afterwards, possibly.
Correct. She also called friends and not the police, which leads me to believe, rather than victim shaming, I would think that she was in a state of shock because you have to think about it. You're a 21-year-old, kid, and you're in college, and then 4 people you live with have just been literally stabbed to death and literally feet from you. That has to psychologically damage you somehow. So a lot of people are saying that she's involved, but there's no evidence for that whatsoever, and that has to be incredibly traumatizing. However, they are saying, well, why didn't Bryan, go ahead and take her too? And the interesting theory is they think Bryan was so hyper focused on what had happened and not being able to control his emotions and the chaos that happened after the killing that he probably didn't even see her, which would kind of make sense because if you're laser focused and you're having one of those episodes, I guess, where you're murdering people, you don't necessarily see, I'm not sure, you don't necessarily see everything that's going on around you.
Right. Yeah, totally. And when you're in college, and obviously she thought she saw someone who had a mask on, but she also said it kind of looked like he had bushy eyebrows. Your mind plays tricks on you, and you really can't always trust what you see. And maybe she was just like, maybe I'm drunk and I'm not seeing clearly. They're in college. People are bringing people home to party or whatever.
Interesting thing to note. My phone is about to die. An interesting thing to note is that they're in a town where they've never even had a murder investigation. This type of stuff does not happen. They're not from, we're from, a larger city. They're not from a large city to where this type of stuff is, ingrained into you to be afraid of people, be afraid of people, be afraid of people. So naturally, and you're in a college town, maybe her roommate brought somebody back. The amount of gaslighting people do to themselves to, not have that fear, that's a real thing, and I feel for the poor girl, to be honest, because that has to be incredibly hard to have your friends murdered, and then a lot of people are wondering, why you did do something, But
yeah,
it's not her responsibility.
We don't know why she didn't do something. Maybe she didn't know she needed to do something until she woke up the next morning, saw everyone in the house was attacked. But I would say about regarding Bryan, I'm going to be honest, he reminded me of Ted Bundy when I first heard about him, because he's one of those, he's outspoken, he claims to be very intelligent, and he tried to do things like work for the police department.
I tried to start working for them as early as 2021 is when he was trying to internship. He actually wrote an essay explaining how he wanted to help them with technological advances, which I think is almost hilarious because what got him caught was his DNA on a button sheath of a knife that he left laying around. So obviously technology got him there.
And that's why I say, for someone who claims to be so smart, if he is indeed the murderer, such a dumbass thing for him to have done, unless it was done intentionally. However, the DNA that was on the leather sheath, the knife sheath, it had DNA, and they matched that DNA to some trash that they found in his parents' Yeah. And
they also for your Y chromosome, by the way, men. So if you're going to commit a crime, just make sure that your dad isn't around, because they can match that Y. It's called, I believe, YTS or YCS DNA testing, where they match your Y chromosome, and it's 99.9% accurate because it has to match to a direct male figure related to you.
And let's talk about his dad for a second, because he had spent a lot of time with his dad recently, even to the point of like when they were the next morning, he got pulled over and he was in the car with his dad. So I don't want to like bring any like Haley Anthony type of shit in here, but if there's always a possibility to me that his dad was helping him maybe cover up the crime afterwards, or maybe he didn't know about it because
he did for a living.
I just feel like if my kid murdered someone and I was with him the next day, I would notice he was acting a little weird, right?
Well, that's the thing. This Bryan's a grandiose narcissist, so it kind of just depends on what your definition of weird is, because usually grandiose narcissists, they have a very good masking complex. Now, I don't know anything about the father. I'm curious to see what the father's occupation was. I'm curious to see if Bryan was trying to impress daddy. I'm curious to see if Bryan has mommy issues, because, you know, where's the mom? What's her involvement in all this stuff? So it's interesting to note. I wonder what the father's, we don't know if he's involved, but you wonder what psychological effects that relationship plays out, especially if he's with him right after the murders. It's almost kind of like a dog when they, you know, when a dog kills an animal in the yard, they kind of try to run it to you, like, oh, here, you know, here's your little prize. I wonder if it's one of those type of situations where he's, you know, but who knows the minds of killers, you know? They haven't even released the motive yet.
Now, Bryan, at one time, he worked under a very famous forensic analyst, and she actually wrote a book or like a study on Dennis Rader, the BTK killer.
Right.
And the BTK killer actually spoke out and said that Bryan reminds him of himself. The BTK killer, also a huge narcissist, he named himself the BTK killer, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting is Bryan was on, if you'll remember, Bryan on Reddit asking people about emotions while they're committing crimes. So, you know, also that goes plays into the narcissist and psychopathic effect, because you don't necessarily know how to mimic actual real emotion, so you have to watch other people, which is what serial killers do. So that's a really interesting thing to me too. That would probably remind Mr. BTK of himself, is the trying to mimic human emotions to elicit a response that you want, so that you can further analyze your victims and stuff.
In class, Bryan, he was very loud. He was a person who would start debates, speak out against things. He even told his class, I mean, we're in 2023. He told his class he was a supporter of traditional marriage. So basically, he's a homophobe. And he said that loudly in front of everyone. But
he probably has a secret boyfriend, just be honest.
Probably, because that's how it usually but when they were talking about the murders in class, he was silent. So he was very outspoken at every time except for when they talked about the murders. He was very quiet, which at the time his classmates didn't think anything of it. But as time goes on, like when you're in the middle of things, you don't see the big picture. But as time went on and he got arrested, they said,
they start to see small things.
Look at all these pieces.
One when was being quiet in class, I'm very curious. I did not mean to interrupt you, by the way. I'm very curious to see what his facial expressions were like when they were discussing the case, because, you know, grandiose narcissists, they love to hear about themselves. And I'm interested to see, was he delightfully quiet, like, oh, I'm so smart, I'm so great, they have nothing, or was he screaming in his seat because they were saying, oh, well, he fucked up here and here and here. And we all know that grandiose narcissists cannot handle any type of challenge to their ideologies or anything. So I'm very curious what kind of silent he was.
Right. Yeah, I would be curious. Now, a lot of the people who have, like his classmates and people who were even his friends who have spoken out, most of them have said, you know, we didn't expect anything like this from him. But I think that's exactly why someone like him would do something like that, because he would think, oh, I'm so smart, I'm going to get away with this. No one will expect that I've done this.
But the thing is that he's so stupid in the fact that you left the simple DNA evidence lying around. You were easy to track. He was also in that area 12 different times in the last 5 months, which cell phone records show. So he already has a whole stalking thing going on, which is why I already think he was in the house, to be honest with you.
And maybe he visited those times so that he could plan out the house location, the escape, and things like that. And he, like you said, since August, he's visited 12 times that they know of. It could have been more times.
That's just cell phone records that they have. He could have left his phone at home. We don't know.
Exactly. Now, I will say, so let's get into the evidence. Obviously, we've talked about some of it, like the DNA evidence, his phone evidence. There's also the evidence of his Hyundai Elantra that an eyewitness saw, but they couldn't make out the license plate. However, the next morning, they were stopped twice on the interstate. 2 different officers pulled them over. Was it stop twice or 2 different? It says a pair of traffic stops. So I'm going to assume it was 2 traffic stops. Pulled him over for killing.
What had happened was there was 2 white Elantras in the area at the time of the murders. They were confused between the 2 cars, but what got Bryan in trouble was he had a whole Pennsylvania license plate. That was the distinction of how they linked it back to him, was because of those Pennsylvania plates, which is probably why he got pulled over twice, because one, it's out-of-state plates in a state, and he was going through, I don't know, Washington or something like that.
It was Interstate 70 east of Indianapolis.
Oh, and yeah, okay, there you
go. Wherever that was,
wherever that was.
Indiana,
okay.
Yeah, they captured, the license plate was captured in Colorado, and the traffic stop was in Indiana.
Yeah, that also just makes it a federal crime, I believe, when you start crossing states.
Right.
And he has evidence with him potentially, but I would be interested to see what charges they would probably bring that up to.
Yeah, so at the time, the evidence hadn't been released to police officers everywhere. It had obviously been local in the area, but it wasn't like a national alert saying, look for this white Hyundai Elantra.
They weren't telling anybody that they had any leads, which everybody was looking at the police investigation like, what is going on? But they had this guy almost from the very beginning. They just didn't want to release, I guess, and mess up the case, which if you think about it, that's actually kind of smart. However, you did have a whole, potential serial killer out here running around loose in the public for weeks.
The police released him with a warning, and he had polite conversation with them, and
I wish I always had polite conversations with the police. Damn.
I never get a warning. Bryan Christopher gets a warning, and I never get a warning.
I remember I got attacked. I got attacked about a month ago, and the police came and they said, "Oh, well, can I see your license to make sure you don't have any warrants?" And I thought, "Oh, okay, great." But Bryan gets a friendly pat on the back, and we'll see you later, son. Don't murder any more girls and a man that loves tulips today. Thank you.
Right. So there's the sighting of the Elantra. It's away at 4:20 a.m. So there was a couple of sightings of this Elantra. Cell phone data. He had, I assume, turned his cell phone off while he had left his home, which he didn't live in Moscow.
They said he turned his cell phone off for about 2 hours because it had no activity on it. So yeah.
So who the fuck turns their cell phone off in the middle of the night and then turns it back on around 5 a.m.?
I mean, no one.
No.
That's weird. It doesn't happen. It's weird. It's admittance of guilt, to be honest.
Who even lets their phone die anymore?
And I would also just like to say, you had just track back. You had compared him with maybe Ted Bundy and Ted Bundy and BTK. The thing is that he's not a serial. So putting him grouped with him is kind of laughable because he's definitely not a serial killer. This is definitely a first time type of deal for him because of all the mistakes he made. He's sloppy, and it's not that we're glorifying murderers here, but he's not in the ranks whatsoever, because if he was, he wouldn't have gotten caught his first time, and he wouldn't have left DNA evidence laying around, and he wouldn't have been seen, and he wouldn't have turned his cell phone off and had a white Elantra with Pennsylvania plates going. So he's not as smart as he thinks he is, which is
he's not. Now, every time somebody hears DNA, they jump on that. DNA is like the only evidence that people say, is spot on. They do say because of the DNA that it's 99.999% of the male population is excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father. So they know, like, almost with certainty that the DNA came from Bryan or a sibling of Bryan.
Does Bryan have a twin that we don't know about? Who knows?
No, he doesn't.
No, that was just an interesting movie plot twist there. Make it make sense because Bryan's not very smart.
Exactly. I think that he's kind of like Ted Bundy and thinks he's so damn smart, but.
Well, the thing about Ted Bundy is Ted Bundy was out there committing murders back before DNA evidence was really hopping around like a jackass. Ted Bundy was out there committing murders before DNA was really even a thing. So he got away with a lot because we just didn't have the technologies. Who knows how quickly we would have gotten him had we had DNA evidence back then. It wouldn't have gone on as long as it did. So that's the only reason he was as good or whatever as he was, doing what he did.
We have this guy, Bryan. He thinks he's so goddamn smart. He's going to school. He's trying to be an analyst for like criminal investigations and shit like that. If you're so goddamn, you would have known that killing someone with a knife in, all this crap that he did, there's no possible way that he wouldn't have left DNA evidence some way or another.
Oh, well, here's the other really interesting evidence fact that's really funny. So Bryan is a vegan, which is highly interesting that he cares so much about animals, but not about human life. And also, Kaylee, she had a dog. Xana had a dog. It was either Kaylee or Xana. One of them had a dog, and he left the dog alive. And everybody was like, well, that's a little bit weird that she would leave the dog alive. And I always wondered, what was the dog doing?
Maybe he was a really nice, like maybe, like a golden retriever would even.
It was a doodle. I believe it was a doodle. But here's the thing. If your doodle sees you being murdered and stabbed to death, do you not think that dog is going to do something?
Maybe it was scared. I don't think Pepper would help me, and she's a pit bull. Come on. She would probably be. I'm talking about.
My dog would probably let the murderer pet her and be like, can I have a snack?
Yeah. Or if like a burglar came in, Pepper would be like, here, let me show you where the good stuff is.
I don't know. The dog part, I thought that was kind of weird. I was like, well, you'll murder 4 people, but thank you for leaving the dog alone.
Yeah, well, But
he's a vegan.
I was gonna say it makes sense.
Makes total sense.
But his lawyer for some reason thinks he's gonna be exonerated, even though there's DNA evidence against him in the house of a murder of 4 people.
I almost feel like he wanted to get caught because there's no way you can be that absolutely idiotic. If you're an analyst, I wanted to be an FBI crime analyst since the time I was a child. And it's a knife sheath. Why would you not have that attached to you? Why would you even take that off of your body to have the DNA? Why not wear gloves?
Why wouldn't you leave the knife sheath off and just take the knife? Why would you take it sheathed into the house and then leave it behind?
So that's why I think he was already in the house, is because he probably sat there, didn't know, and he was fidgeting with it, and that's why it was off. That's my theory on that, because if you have time to build up that stuff, that's when you start making mistakes because your head starts to fuck with you. It's not a spree killing because he planned it out to record, but when he was in the middle of doing it, I think too many factors went wrong, and I think it's not as smart as he thinks he is.
Or maybe it was unexpected to him that there was 6 people in the house. Maybe he had stalked them since August, knew that 4 people lived there. There was unexpectedly 2 other visitors. He was thrown off.
What's interesting is he also said words like, I'm going to help you, or I'm here to help you, or something like that.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that mean? I'm here to help you. So I almost kind of think, like, in my head, this is going to sound weird. When I heard the whole vegan thing, I said, was he talking to the dog? Like, oh, I'm here to free you from your, I don't know, prisoners? Like, is he in love with the dog? And he,
who knows? But I do know, it's not uncommon for a murderer to, like, try to calm someone down so they don't scream and things like that. and try to
But here's the
say,
thing, it's a
you.
stabbing though. It's not like you know what I'm saying? It's a that's something that's brutal. That's something that you can't keep quiet. That's what keeps bothering me so bad is how do you stab 4 people and nobody hears anybody screaming for their life? So I'm very curious to see one where the autopsy report because how do you get away with stabbing 4 people and nobody hears any doesn't hear the actually you stabbing them? You see what I'm saying?
When both of the people, like the two couples of people who were killed, were in the same room with each other. So one of
Right.
them had to have woken up like when the other one is being murdered. And also, usually when you murder someone with a knife as opposed to like shooting them, that's kind of a crime of passion. That's not, it's hard to stab someone. It's not easy.
So my other theory is they haven't released the autopsy report, I don't believe, but you know how they'll use like Rohypnol sometimes, and you'll put it over, and then it makes the person pass out, and then you can do whatever. I almost wonder if somehow he had something that made them all knock out cold, where they all asleep cold, but they were also on TikTok. The whole thing just does not make sense of how you can stab 4 people in 12 minutes and get out the door and on your way. There's something weird with the timeline, and I don't. That's what's bothering me the most is the timeline is inconsistent with what we know of any true crime knowledge. Stabbing people and 4 people in 2 different levels in under 12 minutes, and then getting out the door in your car and you're on your way. That's a little
Now,
strange.
the other possibility that I was thinking, and of course, like I said, or like we both said, we don't have all the evidence yet, but another thing that I was thinking was it's possible, since we know that the people had come to the house at different times, they weren't all together.
That's
It's
right.
possible they could have come home, not gone into someone's room because giving them privacy. It's possible that he could have killed one of these, like two of these people, when the other people, like when the girls came home from the food truck. Is it possible that he had killed the other couple? Were they already dead when the girls came home from the food truck? Could he have been sitting in their house for hours waiting for them to come home?
What's interesting is that when you're waiting for them to come home, the killing the 2 before, is there not like so when you murder somebody and there's that smell, that iron smell of blood everywhere, there's blood everywhere. What's interesting is that had he killed both of the couple first, let's say he kills the couple first, would you not, when you're going up that level, smell something a little odd?
Well, I don't know the actual layout of the house, and that's the
So
other
I
thing.
actually looked at the layout of the house.
Okay.
The layout of the house. So when they're talking about the second and third stories, they're talking about like I don't know if anybody knows typical college dorms, but they're not typical college dorms, but they're sort of like that layout. They have a bedroom, and then the common living room area. And so they're literally kind of adjacent. The doorways are adjacent to each other, and then there's the middle living room area. So it's not very much space for everything to be going on, but it's a living room and 2 bedrooms. And then so that's what's also interesting is there's a common living room area.
Okay. Well, it could also be that, when you're so drunk, sometimes you're just oblivious to your surroundings.
Very true. Well, they also said that they didn't typically always lock the door because it was one of those kind of houses where everybody was sort of in and out, in and out. It was a party house. And also, this is a town that's, again, like we said, super safe. They've never even had a murder investigation. This is not something that is ingrained into their brains to be afraid of people or to have mistrust. Of course, we always hear horror stories, but unless you grow up to where that stuff is like prevalent and frequent, it's not something that you're going to be, cognizant on, especially if you're 20 something years old, 21 years old, and you're in that kind of like party, school, friend, lifestyle. You're not thinking, oh, somebody's probably hiding in my house. Let me lock my door.
Right. Now, there were multiple windows that had been broken
Mm-hmm.
in the house, probably so that he could gain access to them. And I guess they didn't notice that. So that's why I say I'm not quite sure. Maybe they were just kind of oblivious to their surroundings and they were just like, okay, we're safe at home, whatever. I don't know. Maybe they just weren't paying attention to their surroundings.
To me, like I think another good theory, because you had brought something up earlier that made me think of something. You said that stabbing somebody with a knife is more of a crime of passion. I wonder if one of the girls had maybe rejected him, or if he has one of those. What is that? those men that say that they're celibate, the incels. He kind of gives me and he kind of gives me that sort of vibe where he thinks that women like owe him something and all women are supposed to want to sleep with him.
It's interesting that you bring that up. Okay, because two things. Number one, whenever he would do these debates in class, if he was debating with someone who was a woman, disabled, or just someone who, like a minority, like, a Hispanic or a Black person, he was much more rude to them than if he was debating with like a Caucasian male. And he's known to have told his friend, I could go to a bar and I could pick up any woman that I wanted to.
Yeah, so that falls right in line with that. So I wonder if one of the girls, they probably didn't even know him, didn't even say anything to him, and then he somehow was like, oh well, she didn't automatically swoon at me, so he started this thing in her mind where he started to stalk, and he felt like taking everything from her. And I honestly, interestingly enough, wonder if it's one of the girls that survived, and he just went and murdered her. Who knows? It really can never make sense with these type of people, but it's interesting to debate on it.
Yeah, so obviously they've got DNA evidence. It's not clear though what the connection is with him and the actual victims. He could have gone to once and they didn't even know who he was, for all that we know.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying these girls, it could have been as simple as they saw him at a coffee shop, you know what I mean, didn't smile at him, and he was like, oh, you're going down. But you know what I mean? Like,
he was stalking them for months.
For months. That's what's crazy. That's why I think it was, I get the incel type of vibes too, and especially maybe having daddy issues. I don't know, but it all kind of, there's a circle and it's all, adds to it, but you can't put the pieces together to actually make the whole statue yet. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And there's a lot of pieces of the case that are not going to be talked about until the actual trial. There's a reason for that, obviously. They don't want to make a mistake. They don't want
They haven't even released the 911 tapes yet. So
right.
They said that's up to the prosecution, which is also interesting enough to me because I'm curious why the 911 tapes have not been released exactly yet. And I think that's also spewing a lot of the victim shaming too. Everybody wants somebody to blame, but the only person to blame is the one that had the knife, and that would be Bryan. And so I think that's also important to remember, is that we're talking about 20, 21-year-old kids here. Exactly. You don't know what you would do in that situation until you're in that situation. So I think that's also important to remind the viewers that, it's why we can give information about cases and give our own speculations. We all truly do not know what happened until it comes out, and we might never know what exactly happened because sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to people being just absolute nutbags.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously the police don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to screw this case up. But a lot of times, whenever I'm like researching a case, I love to listen to the 911 calls and the interrogations because I feel like you can get a lot of information from an interrogation. Because during the interrogation, they use something called the read technique, and every question that they ask, every conversation that they have with a suspect is intentional, and you can gauge by their response a lot about the crime that they've committed, their mindset. And I do think it's interesting that he was really interested in a criminal's mindset. Like,
right.
What he did was analyze things like that. And he probably thinks that he's so smart that he can stand up to these techniques. But I will tell you, I have seen even the smartest guys fall short during interrogations. I hope he posts his interrogation someday.
I mean, during interrogations, what you're talking about, just to further on that point, they even look at stuff. So, let's say a husband murders his wife or vice versa, and they're trying to, get him on that. And so then they don't have a body yet. Let's say the husband says something, well, she was such an amazing wife. She was. They said, well, why are you using past tense? So it's small things like that they pick up in your behavior. They can be having a normal conversation with you about breakfast. Well, she used to make me breakfast. That was great. Well, why do you say she used to? You're talking about her in a past tense as if you already know that she's gone and she's not here on this plane. And then they pick on that small signal, and then they use that small grain of evidence to keep going and keep messing with your subconscious mind so that you tell on yourself. That's how advanced these interrogation techniques
And you're gonna slip. I just watched an interrogation yesterday where it was a stepmother who had abused a child to the point of the child starving to death. And whenever the police were talking to her, they were like, "How was her eating?" And she said, "Oh yeah, she ate well." And at that moment, after she said that, she just like sunk down into the chair because she ate well or she eats well.
Right.
You just hold on yourself then. And it's so easy to do. But they pick up on those nonchalant behaviors, and even just like fidgeting, like scratching your foot. You're going to scratch your foot or whatever. They can say, okay, it's obviously it's not 100% certain, but that could be a way to release nervous energy. So something as small.
Jodi Arias is what reminds me of. We've talked about Jodi Arias before. Going and watching her interrogation tapes are absolutely legendary because Jodi Arias was, when you're talking about fidgeting, she was doing, I don't know, jumping jacks or cartwheels or stretching or all kinds of weird stuff. And she totally she started singing at one point. She was concerned about her looks, and she had stabbed her boyfriend in the shower. I don't know, 1946 times, something like that. So that's
in the washing machine. That's normal.
Yeah. So but by all means, she was concerned about her singing. So it wasn't very good, by the way.
Obviously, I think that we will, as time goes on, we will find out a lot more information about this case as autopsy reports come out, as he's interrogated, as we get more evidence, more people, because right now there's a gag order, so people can't talk about the case right now if they are close to the case or if they're working on the case. So,
and you can imagine that that has to be frustrating too if a lot of people are victim shaming you and saying things and you can't even say anything to defend yourself. So we all have to be recognizant of that these are victims. We don't know what happened. And it's easy to point blame at other people because you want answers. But I think that it's important to point blame at the one person that caused it. And sometimes we have to be okay that we might not have answers, but that doesn't mean we need to go looking for them or they don't even lie. So I think that's important to remember too.
I think it's really important. Yeah, definitely. Because we don't have all the evidence. He goes to court again in 4 days. So he thinks he's going to be exonerated. I think he's going to get the death penalty. That's what I think. I think he's going down.
Put money on the fact that I bet he tries to write a book about this. I feel like he just seems like the type that would, do this type of thing for. I feel like he thinks he looks cool somehow. I feel like he thinks that this was like the best idea ever and that he's going to get exonerated and then he's going to write a book of how to get away with murder. I feel like
OJ?
Kind of like an OJ. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's really what I feel like he's going for if he feels like he's going to be exonerated. Or they're going to try to say mental defects. But here's the thing about mental defects. I don't know about particularly in their state, but when you plot and you plan and you stalk somebody, that's not temporary insanity because you have put motive and planning behind this crime for months upon months upon months. That's called premeditation. And it's not insanity when you're premeditating and plotting and planning out 4 murders. So, if not more.
His lawyer, though, is infamously known to have worked on a case where an Idaho police officer lied, resulting in a conviction being overturned, a murder conviction, because of false statements or whatever. So I think that is why they're so quiet on things that are happening, because they know if they one fuck up, this lawyer is going to get them.
I think that murderer will be on. She's trying to say, "Oh, look, this is an unfair part." They've run a murder investigation. They had this person going out, that person going out. I think that's probably why they are being quiet. You're exactly right. Is they don't want. They did ask for outside help too. They don't want this lawyer to be able to overturn this conviction or overturn these charges based on something that they didn't do from being inexperienced in this type of crime.
Right. Because, like you said earlier, they've not experienced something. This is new to them. This
And
is
can you imagine? And I just want everybody to imagine for 2 seconds. Can you imagine? You have a job as a cop. You obviously know that this stuff can happen. But somebody calls you, hey, there's four kids murdered on down here. I don't think you're ever prepared to see something like that. Even law enforcement, they can spend years and they don't ever see quadruple homicides.
right.
Especially of kids. So you also have to think about the officers, just everybody's mental health and well-being, because we can talk about it, oh, like it's no big deal, 4 people got stabbed, yada, yada, yada. But just imagine if it was, you walking into that situation and you seeing that has to be traumatizing, probably for everybody involved and the whole town.
Oh, exactly. I mean, everyone's
So.
probably sitting in fear right now. What if Bryan isn't the murderer? What if he was set up, which I don't think is the case, and there's still a killer on the loose? Or what if he does get exonerated and he is like a Ted Bundy motherfucker and he goes out and kills more people?
I would really love it, to be honest, and this is going to sound horrible, if one of his like gay lovers came forward, just to really, because he honestly screams, he screams something like infidel. He thinks he's above women. He's homophobic. He's like all this stuff. It has to boil on down together. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
I would really love it if he had a lover come forward. Just really, that would solidify. That would make me happy. Just put him in his place.
But I just think maybe, I don't know, maybe he had someone, or maybe he was such a loud, just over the top, and I'm so smart, like type of person that he didn't have anyone. Maybe he was lonely. I mean,
it's always the ones that think that they're the smartest. I mean, when do you ever hear actual smart people that are genius level tell people that I'm so smart and have to boast it? Because usually when you have it, you don't boast about it. So it almost kind of screams like he grew up with people telling him you're not smart, and he said, "Oh, well, I'm going to prove you wrong." But in reality, the people he grew up with were pretty smart. I knew that he's smart. That's the thing.
Well, I will say his friends, his family, they stand behind him or whatever. But personally, I do believe
his friends and family are standing behind him.
I'm sorry, you sound like a robot.
Okay. I said his friends and family are standing behind him, you said?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
His friends don't think that he did it. And I am going to be interested to see how they react to all the evidence that they're going to show in court, because there's going to be evidence that we don't know about.
Well, honestly, I think that if you want to support him, that's great. Let's put him out on bail and we'll have him spend the night at your house.
No, because he'll probably go in someone's window.
But no, I mean, to those friends that support him, okay, great, we will let him out and he can come live with you since you support him so much.
But
that's
I guess we'll see what happens in a few days. We'll see what happens at his court case in a few days. And obviously, I'm sure we'll have an update eventually. It might take months and months and months to get autopsy reports. Who knows if his actual interrogation will ever be released? We don't know. Right. It could be years from now that it's released. We don't know, but hopefully we will have a conviction soon.
I'm sure they're also still doing due diligence to where they have to find out if he's committed other crimes, because they typically start to go back to see if you have committed other crimes. He was really sloppy with this one, so I highly doubt he's done anything near this level, but they also have to take the time to make sure he's not connected, to other possible things.
Or even like a rape or something, because I don't put it behind. He did not sexually assault any of the people that were these victims, but just the way that he is, it wouldn't surprise me if he had done other violent crimes, even if it wasn't.
Not shocking whatsoever at all.
So, but hopefully we'll get more information soon. We'll find out if this guy is a dirty piece of shit and he killed these 4 people in their homes. And I just pray that their family can somehow move on, just because it is horrific. Because not only did they lose their child, but some of these other people were like their family. These people were like enmeshed as like a big family. And so they didn't just lose their child, they also lost other kids that they considered to be like family.
And you have to imagine, I mean, even the families that didn't lose kids too. Imagine the fear that I think every college age parent, when you have teens in college, you think, okay, they're going to be safe. This has to have rocked that entire college town, every single, person, every single parent, and then especially those parents. I mean, I don't, my heart definitely goes out to them because I don't know how you get up every day and continue to go on knowing that your child was brutally murdered. That's just something that I would not wish on anybody in the entire world. So my heart and thoughts go out to them.
I hope that the other 2 survivors that were in the house, they get the therapy that they need, because God, this is going to, mentally, I would be totally destroyed. I mean, come on. They are like, it's almost like
the comments are really bad. Yeah. So I've been reading the comments on a bunch of videos and stuff, and they're really going after GM Dylan. They're really going after her, and everybody goes, "We want to know why. We demand answers." And that has to be encouraged. And she's on a gag order. She can't defend herself.
Yeah.
So and it's also not even about her, but you have to think she has parents too. Can you imagine how her parents are feeling? We have to all think about, we don't know everything, so we all have to stop, shaming and blaming people like we've been saying, like you're saying too.
Exactly. Yeah, because we don't know what happened, and we won't know what happened until this case is over. And they can release.
These parents are actively grieving. They're actively grieving. I'm sure they don't want to see their kids' friends being railroaded either, So we all have to remember that we need to be sensitive, because while we want answers, I'm pretty sure that the parents of the victims want answers more than we do. So if they're not saying anything, if they're not raising red flags about a certain situation, I would leave it alone and let the police and the investigators handle the rest of the operation.
They're doing their job. We need to let them do their job. And there's so many times when cases like this happen, we don't know all the information. A prime example is Athena Strand. People were crucifying her stepmother.
Crucifying.
And she had nothing to do with it.
But I guarantee you that her stepmom will probably have issues, anxiety forever, thinking that people think that she, did something to her stepdaughter when it was really the UPS driver.
It was a FedEx driver.
I'm so sorry, a FedEx driver. So sorry. I would just like to apologize to all the USP workers. Excuse me, FedEx. A FedEx driver.
It was a FedEx driver. And actually a FedEx driver. It was a contract worker who delivered things for FedEx.
Oh, okay. So he wasn't even So some bum, some bum.
No bum did it, and that stepmother immediately was crucified. Everybody was like, she had something to do with it, blah blah blah, and she had nothing to do with it.
Well, this is the thing. We're all true crime junkies at this point. True crime has become such a popular thing, especially in the last 10 years, even though it's always been popular, that we always think that we know everything. And that's the issue, is when, let's not be like Bryan, where you think that you're so smart that you have all the answers and you know everything. We have to remember that we don't know everything, and we can still make mistakes like leaving, our DNA on our knife sheet that we left at the crime scene. So let's not be like Bryan here.
Right. So, innocent until proven guilty, but I think this motherfucker did it. But obviously, we're going to wait for the trial. So
maybe he had identity dissociative disorder, and he's going to try to blame, Brianna or whoever else is inside of him. So
it was Trisha.
It wasn't me. That's why I'm exonerated. Bryan would never leave a knife sheath with DNA. It was Brianna. She lives inside of me.
God. Or maybe just never mind. Anyway, thank you so much for talking with me about this case.
Thank you for having my rants. I appreciate it, everybody.
Of course, yeah. Hopefully next week we will have some more answers. And we're going to be covering a different case next week, obviously. But once we do have an update on this case, we will discuss it a little bit and just, let all of our ghosties know what the outcome is. I'm sure everyone is following it, but maybe not as closely as we are. And also, once a suspect has been captured, and, a lot of times the hype dies down once they are on trial or everything, because, at that point, the cops have figured it out, right? So, but anyway, this is our perspective of it. Hopefully we'll have answers soon.
And also just a reminder to don't make assumptions about things that you don't know about. Because when you make assumptions, what happens? You make a ass out of you and me. Or something
right.
Like
You look right. So
anyway.
Well, thank you for talking with me, and we will talk again soon. And all of our viewers, I'm sorry we did not post the video on Saturday like we said, but we had some other stuff going on and just connection with our schedule issues. But we are here today on Sunday, and we will hopefully be back next Saturday. Maybe Sunday. I don't know. Don't hold me to it. I'm like such a procrastinator. I'm always late to everything. That's just my personality.
We're not BTK. We're not out here meticulously planning things just yet. So give us some time.
we're not geniuses, but we're trying our best. So, but anyway, thank you, cookies. We love you. Bye.
Bye, guys. Good show.